Hi there. I'm recording this during a weather emergency in the UK. We've been warned of extreme heat and told to stay indoors. Don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary, and so on. Another word for this is summer. And in my opinion, it's an overreaction. I've done what I normally do. I trained this morning. I've been out, done my normal stuff, had dinner in the city centre, and I've come home. I am keeping hydrated, and that's it. But the nanny state is alive and well. Anyway, today's book is The Men, the Mission and Me by Pete Blaber, who was a squadron commander in Delta Force. And unlike most military autobiographies, which are just a progression of their career, this book uses highlights or episodes from his career to illustrate various concepts and principles and lessons that he's extracted to pass on. And in that way, it makes it a highly interesting book on two different levels. So some of the highlights of the book include his time during unit selection for Delta, where he got lost, and he had an experience where he had an encounter with what he thought was a bear. And it's actually quite humorous, but when you consider the mental pressure involved in trying to pass selection, he'd come from the Rangers, it makes it a little bit more serious. So he went through the usual pipeline, and he ended up being the commanding officer of B Squadron of Delta. And one of the deployments they had was Bosnia. And they sit around planning to snatch a war criminal, and they have to think out of the box, toss ideas how to defeat this guy's bodyguards. And it's quite interesting, and the mix of ideas, it's kind of like the SAS Chinese Parliament idea. So that's an interesting one. And another episode is they had a think about what kind of training they should do for future conflicts, and they came to the conclusion that mountains would probably be the common denominator, and so they decided to schedule a training trip for his squadron to the Bob Marshall Wilderness area in Montana. Now, Montana's a pretty empty state anyway, the clue in the name, but the Bob Marshall is a huge section of it which is complete wilderness, and there's no roads or anything in it. So it's ideal training environment for them. And the planning, what they should take, what they should leave, weight considerations and so on. And they meet two people during this, and one they meet prior to going in a restaurant, and it turns out he was ex-military himself, and he gave them some really good advice. And the other was what they call Ranger Sue, who is one of the rangers assigned to the Bob Marshall, and she gives them some advice. And at first they were kind of, or some of the guys were, well, you know, we're special operators, these are civilians, what do they know? But wiser heads prevailed because they had local knowledge. And that was the lesson that Pete Blaber instills here. Listen to the voices on the ground. They've got the local knowledge, they've got the local experience. And it turned out that it was essential, what they were being told. And they kind of jettison some of their ideas on saving weight to take mission essential equipment. He also talks about the pitfalls of the conventional US military planning method, which is a long drawn out process. And he continually through the book, he talks about the plan as if it's carved in stone. And once the plan has been established, it's as if it exists, and there can be no deviation. Where all it is a concept. It's a proposal. And the old military adage, no plan survives contact with the enemy, is very much to the forefront. But these senior officers got this planning model, and once the plan's been locked in, that's it. Ground reality can't intrude. Whereas Pete Blaber uses the example of the Lewis and Clark expedition, which went right into the unknown, and he uses the term "develop the situation." So whatever they found, they used common sense, used the accumulated knowledge they got so far, and developed the situation. And there's been lots of examples through history. I mean, those expeditions that explored the world or explored remote areas, I'm thinking of Shackleton and so on, they couldn't take enough supplies for the whole mission. They couldn't plan everything that might happen and all the catastrophes. They developed the situation. And that's what he was proposing for Afghanistan, to develop the situation. And to that end, he found this former Egyptian soldier who had come to the United States, become a Green Beret, and ended up in prison, because basically he was a fighter and he wanted to fight, and he ended up associated with the wrong guys. But his allegiance really was always to the good guys. And Pete Blaber got access to him in federal prison. And this guy was an absolute fount of knowledge about conditions in Afghanistan and how the military should make use of, or how they should approach the locals, and things they should look out for, signatures and so on. For example, the Arabs, the Al-Qaeda, who are Arabs, eat lamb. The locals eat goat. So you find out who's buying lamb. It was things like that. Also, the conventional wisdom was that there was a ring of steel around the targets, anti-aircraft guns and all sorts of things. It made it sound like wartime Berlin. And this guy said that's completely wrong, and he put him in touch with some former Afghan fighters who'd settled in Washington DC, and Pete Blaber phoned them up, and they had the ground knowledge, and he said no, that stuff's all rusted and didn't exist in the first place, most of it, and it was open targets. And then there's a big section about what is known as Operation Anaconda, and it was a massive operation, and again Pete Blaber was by now in charge of what was called AFO, Advanced Force Operations, which was a task force comprising of Delta, CIA, and other intelligence people, sort of an advanced reconnaissance and planning cell. And so that's what they did. And then the conventional military plan came in, and this plan was developed, and the AFO advice was ignored. One of the other problems that Pete Blaber talks about is operations are helicentric. In other words, the military uses helicopters, but helicopters give off a very, very visible and audible signature. They are weather dependent, they are load dependent, and they are vulnerable, particularly in mountainous areas, to even small arms and RPG fire, as they found out during Operation Anaconda. And one of the problems is that the higher headquarters for the special units is called JSOC. And JSOC was created after Operation Eagle Claw, the Iran hostage rescue, because there were very, very noticeable failures in not just in the actual execution of the raid, but in the planning. And basically, it was Buggin's turn. Everybody wanted in on it. Oh, we've got to include the Marines. Oh, we've got to include the Navy. Oh, we've got to include, everyone, the Salvation Army. So all these disparate elements who had never trained together and had different SOPs, different types of equipment, and there were failures, and it was a catastrophe, not to put too fine a point on it. So the idea was they created JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, which was to streamline all this. So you had Delta, you had SEAL Team 6 as your main two special mission units. Then you had a dedicated Army helicopter unit, the 160th, and then you had a dedicated United States Air Force Special Operations Aviation element. And it was all designed to work together. And by and large, it's been okay, except for Buggin's turn again. And the crazy thing, and I don't think we would do it in the UK, although you never know, is that each of the elements has to have a turn at providing the commanding officers. And so you had the weird situation where for Operation Anaconda, the two top guys, the commanding officer, commanding general of JSOC, and his deputy were both aviators. So you had Del Daly, who came from the helicopter side, and Greg Treborn, who was from the Air Force side, running special operations. Now, I think that's crazy. I think the commanders should always be from the special mission units. And to hell with Buggin's turn and all the rest of it. They should have their own promotion pipeline. And Pete Labour's trying to convince Del Daly of the problems in the plan, and he's stubborn, he won't be convinced, doesn't listen, tries to put his foot down, and people were killed as a result. And it was very much a disaster. Saved largely by some of the guys that had been pre-positioned into OPs by the AFO plan, who did manage to stop more of a catastrophic failure. So altogether, the book it's highly readable. It's got a lot of surprising concepts in it. There's a thing I've extracted from it, which is his planning method. It's a little 3-line planning method. I won't give it away here because it's in the book, but I found that very, very useful. Outside of obviously military application, it's for everyday application. It's an elegant little planning model. The book's almost worth the price just for that. So it's a few years old now, but the lessons remain as valid now as ever. So enjoy.